Reverend Malcolm Price, a black minister dressed in a modest clerical shirt, sat quietly in seat 4B of first class, his gaze fixed on the runway of Lexington International Airport as the engines beneath him roared to life. Senior Flight Attendant Deborah Whitlow glided down the aisle, her posture stiff, her eyes cold. Her smiles skipped him entirely. Her expression hinted at quiet judgment, a flicker of disdain that revealed more than words ever could. To her, Malcolm looked out of place, an anomaly in a section reserved for the elite. What she didn't know? Malcolm's family owned Stratus Air, the very airline she proudly served. That small act of disregard, so casual, so calculated, would unravel her entire world before the wheels ever touched down. Because prejudice always thinks it knows its target, but sometimes it chooses the wrong one. Before we dive deeper, tell us where you're watching from. If you believe in justice, hit that like button and subscribe for more true-to-life, emotional stories. 30 minutes into the flight from Lexington to Ravenhill, the Airbus A380 cruised at 35,000 feet, cutting through layers of violet dusk. First class glimmered with the sounds of gentle clinking glassware and the low hum of privileged conversation. Malcolm sat composed, his broad shoulders relaxed against the leather seat, his dark eyes scanning the horizon through the oval window. He wore a plain black clerical shirt, the collar neat, a small silver cross catching the overhead light. His hands rested on his lap, hands marked by years of service and healing, but steady with a quiet strength. He was thirsty, his throat dry from a sleepless night spent comforting a grieving family back in South Haven. The recycled cabin air only deepened his discomfort. As the drink cart neared, he shifted slightly, ready to make a simple request. A glass of water. Deborah Whitlow moved with mechanical precision. Her navy blazer hugged her lean frame, and her blonde hair was tied into a bun so tight it looked like it hurt. 12 years with Stratus Air had made her a veteran. She knew the protocols, knew who belonged and who didn't. To her left, a white man in a sharp navy suit accepted a flute of champagne. "Enjoy, sir," Deborah cooed with a syrupy smile. Across the aisle, an older woman in pearls received sparkling water. "Anything else I can get you, ma'am?" Her voice was velvet. But when Deborah arrived at Malcolm's row, her expression soured. Her eyes flicked over his dark skin and humble attire, and something in her posture stiffened. She didn't say a word, didn't offer a smile. To her, he was a mistake in her curated cabin, a smudge on polished glass. Malcolm cleared his throat gently. His voice was warm, calm, the kind that had soothed hundreds of troubled souls. "Excuse me, could I please have a glass of water?" His tone was respectful, quiet, a simple need, the kind of request that shouldn't have made a ripple. Deborah froze for a split second, her hand hovering over a row of plastic cups. Then her face shifted, a tight tilt of the head, the practiced expression of someone barely holding in irritation. "We're busy right now." "Wait your turn," she snapped, her tone clipped, cold, and loaded with contempt. The words hung in the air, like a slap. She didn't glance at him again, didn't acknowledge the tray of untouched water glasses within reach. Instead, she turned back to the man in the suit, pouring another round of champagne, her smile switching on like a light. The businessman remained oblivious. The older woman across the aisle glanced at Malcolm briefly, her brow furrowing, then quickly buried herself in a magazine. No one spoke up. No one said a word. Malcolm didn't flinch. He'd been here before. Dining rooms, retail counters, hotel lobbies, places where his collar should have brought respect, but rarely did. His jaw clenched slightly, betraying a sliver of frustration. Still, his hands stayed folded. His body remained composed. The cabin hummed around him. Glasses clinked, ice rattled. Conversations flowed like rivers, and he sat there, unseen. Eyes flicked toward him, then away just as quickly. The discomfort rolled through first class like a chill wind. No one challenged Deborah. The silence? Loud. Heavy. Malcolm let out a quiet breath through his nose, then reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. His fingers typed with calm precision. A short message to his sister. Same old story. His sister, Jada Price, was no ordinary sibling. She was the chief operating officer of Stratus Air. He hit send. Seconds later, the phone buzzed with her reply. Stay calm. I've got this. Those 5 words were a lifeline, a steel promise wrapped in love. He tucked the phone back into his pocket and leaned against the seat, eyes half closed, not asleep, but focused, because he knew Jada was already in motion. Thousands of miles away in the corporate heart of Ravenhill, Jada was a storm in heels. She didn't lose. Ever. Back in the sky, Deborah Whitlow strutted toward the galley, heels clicking, face smug. She didn't look back. Didn't care. In her mind, she'd won a small battle, a subtle reaffirmation of who she believed deserved to be in first class. What she didn't know, the storm had already been set in motion. She drifted past a young couple sipping Merlot, her smile honeyed and inviting. Can I get you anything else? She cooed, her voice soft and sweet like satin. All traces of bitterness had vanished. Deborah Whitlow saved her charm for the one she believed deserved it. The cart gave a soft metallic jolt as she locked it into place. With a quick tug, she adjusted her blazer, smoothing out wrinkles no one else could see. What she didn't realize was that she'd just flicked the first domino. To her, it was nothing. Just another moment, another unspoken assertion of class and control. But what she'd really done was light a fuse, one that would quietly burn all the way to landing. She believed she'd won a quiet victory, upheld her personal sense of order, reinforced the invisible structure she'd followed for years, one that had no room for men like Malcolm Price in her sacred first class. Malcolm watched her disappear down the aisle, his expressions unreadable. He hadn't come looking for confrontation. This wasn't about drama, but he knew when a line had been crossed. The cabin felt colder now. Recycled air clawed at his already dry throat, but he didn't ask again. Not yet. He had learned the value of patience. He'd stood in pulpits, stared down venom with nothing but a Bible and an unwavering tone. This was more than thirst now. It was about something deeper. The weight of her glare, the poison behind her smile, the way she dismissed his presence without knowing a single thing about him. Malcolm shifted slightly in his seat. The leather creaked. His gaze drifted back toward the window, where the sky outside had deepened into a dusky purple, a bruise across the horizon, mirroring the one blooming silently on his pride. He knew Jada was already working behind the scenes, but he also knew Deborah wasn't done. She wasn't the type to let go. She was too set in her ways, too arrogant to realize she'd just poked the wrong bear. The aircraft sliced through the night, a flying cocoon of complacency and class, carrying its passengers toward Ravenhill. First class settled back into rhythm, glasses clinking gently, soft laughter returning as though nothing had ever happened. The businessman next to Malcolm loosened his tie with a mutter about a missed meeting. The woman across the aisle flipped a magazine page with a crisp snap, already checked out from the discomfort they'd all witnessed and ignored. Malcolm's fingers tapped against his knees, slow and methodical, a rhythm of restraint, of counting down. Deborah believed she'd put him in his place. She was wrong, dead wrong. The water she denied him was just the ripple. What was coming, that was the wave. And by the time this aircraft touched ground, it would crash with force. Because Deborah still had no idea who she'd dismissed. No clue that the man sitting quietly in seat 4B held the keys to her entire career. And when the truth landed, it would be too late. The Airbus A380 floated through the sky. cabin lights dimmed to a soft amber glow. Shadows stretched long across the aisle. Malcolm sat still, his shirt damp and clinging to his chest, a result of a clumsy earlier spill of orange juice, another indignity he'd absorbed without protest. The air buzzed softly, engines humming, seat back shifting. But under the stillness, something had shifted. An unease lingered. Ever since Deborah's sharp dismissal, the atmosphere had grown tighter, more brittle. Malcolm's hand rested lightly on his phone. The screen stayed dark, but his thoughts churned. The ache of being dismissed, again, settled in familiar places. He wasn't shaken, not yet, but the sting burned beneath the surface. Down the aisle, Deborah slipped into the galley. Her steps were swift, deliberate, like a predator stepping back to plot her next move. The cramped space smelled of strong coffee and antiseptic, a cold, sterile contrast to the warmth beyond the curtain. Inside, Tom Hanley, the burly flight attendant with a close-cropped buzz cut, leaned against the counter with that ever-present smirk twisting at the edge of his mouth. He'd always followed Deborah's lead, her shadow an enabler, echoing every bias. Deborah's voice dropped to a hiss, barely audible over the machinery hum. "He doesn't belong up here," she spat, fingers gripping the counter until her knuckles paled. "Some charity case. Probably scammed his way into first class." Her words were poison, wrapped in silk. And Tom, he drank it down. His eyes lit with malice, his voice a low growl. Guy like that? Needs a wake-up call. Time to remind him where he really stands. Deborah nodded slowly, her lips curling in cruel satisfaction. They were a unit now. Conspirators bonded in prejudice, and like snakes in the dark, they began to strike. Tom rummaged through a drawer, pulling out a small bottle of orange juice. He loosened the cap with deliberate subtlety. "Accidents happen," he murmured, handing it to her. Deborah's smile returned, thin and sharp, as they moved back down the aisle, purpose in every step. Malcolm shifted in his seat, the damp cloth of his shirt rubbing uncomfortably against his back. He reached for his phone again, but paused as he heard the cart rolling softly toward him. Deborah's expression was professional now, every gesture rehearsed. But there was something in her eyes, a glint of something venomous, something planned. Tom followed close behind, his frame casting a shadow over the aisle. Deborah stopped beside Malcolm. Her hands moved with theatrical care as she set a tray on his table. The juice bottle tipped too easily, its contents spilling cold and sticky across Malcolm's chest. "Oh, no," she said flatly, no hint of apology in her tone. "Clumsy me." Tom snorted behind her, barely containing his amusement. Malcolm sat frozen for a second, the chill soaking through his shirt, dripping down onto his slacks. A crowd of silent eyes glanced toward him, then away again. Just like before. A gas slipped from somewhere down the row. But no one said a word. He picked up a napkin. Slowly, carefully. He dabbed at the stain with the composure of a man who'd been humiliated far too often to let it show. But something inside him was shifting. And Deborah Whitlow? She had just taken her last step over the line. The cold splash soaked Malcolm Price's chest like a slap from the sky. Sticky juice clung to his shirt, crawling down in uneven rivulets. "Oh, how clumsy of me," Deborah Whitlow said, her voice flat and smug, not even pretending to be sorry. Her eyes met his with a challenge, daring him to react. Behind her, Tom Hanley chuckled, the sound rough and cruel, like gravel under boots. He folded his arms, standing back like an artist admiring the damage he'd helped create. Malcolm froze for a single breath. The liquid seeped through the fabric, soaking his skin, dripping onto his dark slacks. The citrus tang curled up his nose, not just a spill now, but a public mark. A smear of petty malice carried out in plain sight. Passengers stirred. Someone gasped, a woman in a silk blouse who clutched her wine glass a little tighter and turned away. The businessman beside Malcolm muttered something under his breath, but didn't lift his eyes from his laptop. No one spoke up. No one said a word. The silence grew heavy, cowardly. It settled over the cabin like fog, thick and choking. Malcolm reached for the napkin on his tray, his hand steady despite the tension building inside him. He dabbed at the mess with quiet, slow movements, wiping the sticky juice from his chest like it was just another stain from a long, long road. His face stayed calm, impassive, but beneath that surface a spark was lit. A flicker of righteous anger, shaped and sharpened by years of injustice, endured in silence. Deborah watched from her cart, a predator savoring the hesitation of her prey. "Guess you'll need to dry off," she said. Her voice dipped in mock concern. Then she turned away, pushing the cart onward without another glance. Tom lingered a moment longer, his stare loaded, daring Malcolm to say something. But Malcolm wouldn't give him the satisfaction. He finished wiping his shirt, balled up the soggy napkin in his fist, and pulled out his phone. His fingers moved quickly, precisely. He typed a message to Jada. "They're escalating." He snapped a photo of the stain, vivid orange against black fabric, and hit send. The response came almost instantly. "Evidence now." Jada's message hit like steel through the clouded night, sharp, strategic, ready for battle. Malcolm slipped the phone back into his pocket. In the galley, Deborah leaned against the counter, a curl of hair escaping her bun. She brushed it back with fingers that trembled slightly from the adrenaline rush. "That should shut him up," she muttered. Tom cracked his knuckles with a loud pop, grin wide and wicked. Next time, maybe he'll think twice before asking for anything. They laughed quietly, smug in their belief that they'd won, that their whispered conspiracy had worked. To them, it was the perfect strike. Quiet, humiliating, and done under the radar. Deborah adjusted her bun and glanced at her reflection in the steel of a warming unit. She saw herself as powerful, in control, a gatekeeper of first class. She had no idea she just lit a match in a room full of fuel. Because what Malcolm carried wasn't just silence, it was evidence. And soon, it would speak louder than she could imagine. Back at his seat, Malcolm leaned back. His shirt clung cold and damp to his chest, but his mind had never been clearer. He knew Jada was already pulling the strings, knew she was coordinating behind the scenes, gathering the right people, building a wall of truth to stand against the storm. He wasn't going to fight this with fists or shouts. He was going to let them dig their own hole, brick by vindictive brick. The stain on his shirt? That was proof now. It wasn't just a mess. It was a weapon, a receipt, a mark of cruelty they'd proudly placed in front of witnesses who said nothing. All around him, the cabin returned to quiet. Passengers slipped back into their bubbles, their discomfort neatly folded and tucked away like their napkins. For them, the moment was over, forgotten. But Malcolm didn't forget. His fingers tapped against his knee, slow and steady, the rhythm of a man who knew how to wait. Deborah thought she'd silenced him. She was wrong. She'd just handed him the first piece in a case that would bring everything crashing down. Hey folks, have you ever watched someone get judged unfairly like Malcolm and just wanted to scream at the injustice? Drop a 1 in the comments. Smash that like if you're rooting for him to rise up and turn the tables on Deborah's cruel little game. And hit subscribe, because this sky-high battle, it's just beginning. What happens when the target of prejudice turns out to be the storm? Stick around. You won't want to miss what's next. The Airbus A380 floated high above the earth, the glow of the cabin soft and golden, first class humming with soft laughter and expensive fabrics. But around Malcolm Price, the air felt denser now, like something pressing down from all sides. The juice had dried into a splotchy mark on his shirt, the scent faint but sharp, mixing with the recycled air. He sat in seat 4B, hands steady on his knees. His eyes, alert, watching. He wasn't panicking, but he wasn't passive either. His eyes scanned the aisle, waiting. Then, with the calm of a man done playing nice, Malcolm slid his phone from his pocket again. With a quiet swipe, he opened the camera. The screen glowed faintly as he held it low, angled toward the front of the cabin. The drink cart returned. Deborah, all polished efficiency and crisp uniform, served the next row ahead. Her voice turned soft, almost sweet. "Here you go, ma'am. Anything else?" The woman in the cashmere sweater smiled, sipping her sparkling water, oblivious. Then Deborah moved on, turning to the businessman next to Malcolm. "Another champagne, sir?" He nodded. She smiled. Then she reached Malcolm's row and didn't even look at him. Her gaze passed right over him like he didn't exist. She pushed the cart forward. The untouched water glasses glinted under the lights like a taunt. Malcolm's thumb tapped the record button. He captured every second, every slight, every choice. When she disappeared down the aisle again, heels clicking confidently, Malcolm ended the recording. He uploaded it to Jada with a short message. "Second strike." Seconds later, her reply lit up the screen. "Got it. Calling the captain." Malcolm leaned back, the cool glow of the screen fading. But the fire inside him? It was only just beginning. The footage was crisp, undeniable. Deborah Whitlow's deliberate slight now lived in silent pixels, clear as day. Malcolm Price ended the recording just as her clicking heels vanished down the aisle. That sounded like a drumbeat of defiance. With a single tap, he sent the video to Jada. Second strike. Just 2 words, a flare fired across the sky to his sister's war room in Ravenhill. His phone vibrated almost immediately. Jada's reply cut through the dim cabin light like lightning. "Received. I'm calling the captain now." Malcolm exhaled, slow, steady. He tucked the phone back into his pocket. He knew her tone. She was already slicing through red tape with surgical precision. She might be 600 miles away, but her reach? It was long. And Deborah was about to learn that firsthand. Minutes ticked by. The cabin settled into a deceptive stillness. Champagne flowed. Conversations resumed. To most, it was just another uneventful night in first class. Then came the crackle. The intercom buzzed to life. Captain Reynolds' voice filled the air, calm but sharp with authority. "This is your captain. Deborah Whitlow. Serve passenger 4B. Immediately. No delay." The words fell like a gavel, slicing through the golden comfort of the cabin with a clean, commanding cut. Heads turned. Eyes darted to Malcolm, then toward the galley curtain where Deborah's silhouette stood frozen. A murmur rippled through the rows, part curiosity, part discomfort. The businessman next to Malcolm fidgeted, his champagne glass clinking against the tray. The woman in the cashmere sweater across the aisle peeked over, lips parted, but stayed silent, retreating into familiar avoidance. Then Deborah emerged. Her face was stone. Her bun drawn so tight it looked like it might snap. Her heels slammed into the carpet, each step a silent detonation of rage. Her cart rattled from the force of her grip. She stopped in front of Malcolm's seat. Her hands trembled as she snatched a glass of water from the tray. With a sharp thud, she slammed it down in front of him. A few drops splashed onto the same shirt she'd already stained with juice earlier, like adding insult to injury. She leaned in, just enough for him to hear. "Enjoy it, boy," the slur hissed out in a venomous whisper, cloaked under fake compliance. Her eyes blazed, daring him to react. Malcolm didn't move, didn't blink. He looked her dead in the eye, unmoving, a wall she couldn't scale. Then, deliberately, he lifted the glass. His fingers curled around it with quiet strength. He brought it to his lips and took a long, slow sip. Victory never tasted so cold, or so clear. He set the glass down with a soft clink, eyes still locked on hers. Her mask cracked, just slightly, a twitch in her jaw, a storm beneath the surface. Without another word, Deborah spun on her heel and stormed back to the galley. Her cart bumped the wall on the way out. Around Malcolm, the cabin buzzed. The atmosphere had shifted. A young man in a hoodie across the aisle let out a quiet cheer. "Yeah, man," he muttered, loud enough to cut the tension. An older couple nodded, small gestures, fragile lifelines. Even the businessman next to Malcolm snapped his laptop shut. "About time," he muttered, lifting his champagne like a reluctant toast. The woman in cashmere adjusted her sweater, her eyes flicking to Malcolm with something like respect. The cabin returned to a hush. The engines hummed. Life resumed. But something had broken open. Malcolm leaned back in his seat. The shirt clung to him like a second skin, stained and uncomfortable. But that glass of water sat full and shining on his tray. It was more than hydration now. It was a trophy, the first win in a battle that was far from over. He allowed himself to breathe, to feel the edge of tension soften. But back in the galley, a different storm was brewing. Deborah stood like a statue, hands braced against the counter, knuckles white. She wasn't calm. She wasn't collected. She was fuming. Tom Hanley lounged nearby, chewing at a thumbnail, his usual smirk gone. "Captain's gone soft," he growled, cracking his neck with a pop. Deborah didn't answer. Her mind replayed the moment again and again. That humiliating call over the intercom. The quiet triumph on Malcolm's face. The way he drank that water like he'd won. And he had. For now, she hissed under her breath. "He thinks he's clever. Thinks he can play me." Tom shifted his stance, filling the narrow galley with his bulk. His voice dropped to a low murmur, conspiratorial, charged. "We're not done, Deb. He's not walking away that easy." Her eyes narrowed, her jaw set. Slowly she nodded. Whatever was coming next, it would be darker, sharper. Not another spill. Not another skipped service. The captain's command was a setback, not a defeat. Deborah wasn't the kind to slink away. She adjusted her blazer with a smooth flick, her control snapping back into place like armor. Malcolm might have thought he'd won. He might have believed the cabin's whispers meant he was safe. But he was wrong. Her resentment had only just begun to bloom, and it was venomous. She was already planning her next move. Something that would make that glass of water feel like a mercy. Something he'd wish was the worst of it. Malcolm Price leaned back, unaware of the venom still brewing behind the galley curtain. The half-empty glass sat on his tray, a small trophy from a quiet battle. The plane droned on through the darkness, and for a moment, just a moment, he let himself believe the worst had passed. But hope is fragile at 37,000 feet. And Deborah Whitlow wasn't done. Not even close. The Airbus A380 soared through the clouds, cabin lights casting a warm amber glow over first class. The tension from earlier still lingered, woven into the hush that had fallen like a blanket over the polished seats. Malcolm sat quietly in seat 4B. His clerical shirt clung to his skin, stained with juice and water, the patchwork of every humiliation he'd endured in the last hour. The water glass glistened beside him, the symbol of a hard-won moment of justice. But he wasn't fooled. His eyes traced the aisle carefully, searching for movement. Captain Reynolds' voice still echoed in his memory, a command that had pierced the cabin, restored a bit of dignity. But Malcolm knew better than to think it was over. A single win was never the end. Not when the other side was still plotting. Back in the galley, Deborah stood frozen, her back ramrod straight, her navy blazer creased where her fists had clenched the counter. Her blonde bun sat taut like a crown of fury. She stared into nothing, replaying every moment, every slight. She'd been called out, undermined, forced to serve the man she believed didn't belong. It seared her pride like acid. Across from her, Tom Hanley slouched against the wall, massive arms folded. His buzzed head caught the overhead glare. He cracked his knuckles, slow and deliberate, a sound like dry branches snapping in a fire. "We can't let him walk away grinning like that," he muttered. A ghost of a smirk twitched on Deborah's lips. She nodded. Her mind was already weaving a darker plan, something uglier than a spilled drink or a denied request, something that would bury Malcolm deeper than a stain ever could. She straightened, brushing invisible lint from her lapel, then leaned toward Tom, her voice low and deadly. "He's a problem. We need something that sticks." Tom's eyes narrowed, his grin spreading. "The kind that smells blood." "Security concern," he said casually, but every syllable landed like a loaded threat. "Say he threatened you. A guy like that? No one's going to question it." Deborah paused, just long enough for the lie to root itself. Then she nodded, slow and certain. It was perfect. A fiction with teeth. One that could take a man down before he even stepped off the plane. She glanced toward the cockpit, then back at Tom. Her voice a whisper. "Do it." Tom moved with purpose. He slipped down the aisle and leaned into the cockpit where Vince, the co-pilot, sat, a lean man with a shaved head and a long history of looking the other way. Vince had always been one of them, part of the quiet chain that held the wrong doors open. Tom murmured the plan. Vince didn't hesitate. "I'll lock the forward lav." Make him squirm. Back in the galley, Deborah's lips curled upward, her cruel grin returning. Minutes later, Vince tapped a code into the panel. Click. The first-class bathroom locked with a soft but decisive sound. On the door, the occupied sign flicked on, though no one was inside. It was a trap. A subtle one, but effective. Deborah peeked from behind the curtain, satisfaction glowing in her pale eyes. She'd reclaimed control. Malcolm shifted in his seat, feeling the pressure build inside him from hours of flight and denied relief. He glanced toward the restroom. Still locked, still in use. He waited. 5 minutes. 10. 20. Still locked. The discomfort crept in, a dull ache growing louder in his gut. He sat still, trying to focus, but every second felt like a deliberate insult. Passengers around him sipped wine and typed on laptops. The businessman beside him kept his eyes glued to his screen. The woman in cashmere flipped a magazine page with a soft crinkle. A few passengers glanced toward Malcolm, sensing something wasn't right, but no one said a word. Their silence was a wall, one he knew too well. He pressed his lips together. His suspicion flared. Then he reached for his phone. "They're framing me." He typed the message and sent it to Jada. Her reply came seconds later, sharp and commanding. "Hold tight. Legal's on it." In the galley, Deborah took her next step. Her voice was calm, almost clinical, as she picked up the phone and called the cockpit. "Vince, it's me," she said. Her tone was smooth, professional. But beneath it, poison. Passenger in 4B got aggressive when I gave him water. Said I'd regret it. I'm concerned. It was a lie born from hatred, but it dripped with credibility. Vince didn't blink, noted. He logged the incident in the flight report without question. A paper trail. A digital trap. Deborah hung up, her fingers trembling slightly from adrenaline. She turned to Tom. "He's done," she muttered. Tom nodded, his smirk matching hers. To them, the play was perfect. They believed they'd tightened the noose. What they didn't realize was this. Malcolm Price had stopped playing defense. He was already loading the next strike. From juice stains to shackles, that was the path they were paving. Malcolm Price could feel the shift, though he couldn't name it yet. The air had thickened. The silence was no longer peace. It was pressure. The occupied sign on the first-class lavatory glowed like a lie that refused to blink. An hour had passed. The ache in his lower back now radiated through his legs. He shifted in his seat, trying to stretch without drawing attention. But he kept his posture composed, his expression calm, unwilling to give Deborah Whitlow the satisfaction of watching him squirm. Across the aisle, the young man in the hoodie who had quietly cheered earlier leaned toward him. "Man, that's messed up. You okay?" Malcolm offered the faintest smile, a wordless acknowledgement. He appreciated the gesture, but he didn't want to stoke the flames. Not yet. Others glanced at him, whispers starting to ripple, concern flickering like a dying light, too dim to burn through the curtain of apathy. The businessman beside Malcolm shook his head. "Should have fixed that bathroom by now," he muttered, then buried himself in his screen. Deborah watched from the galley, her smirk wide and gleaming. She could see Malcolm's discomfort, see how he shifted every few minutes, subtle but real. It thrilled her. She thought herself untouchable now, believed her bogus security report would land Malcolm in handcuffs the moment they touched down in Ravenhill. She imagined him dragged off the plane, humiliated, silenced. She adjusted her blazer, smoothed it with deliberate elegance. Tom Hanley stood nearby, leaning on the wall, cracking his neck like a fighter warming up. "Cops'll tear him apart," he muttered, eyes gleaming. Deborah nodded slowly, already picturing the flash of cuffs, the cameras clicking. From petty to perilous. That's where they'd taken it. And she was high on the power. Back in 4B, Malcolm clenched his jaw. His body ached, his ribs tight with cramping muscles. But his spirit? Unshaken. He knew Jada was working. Knew her legal team was already weaving facts into armor. But he also knew Deborah wasn't done. This had never been about water, not about drinks or restrooms. This was about her need to break him, to prove, even now, that he didn't belong. His fingers moved across his phone screen again. "They've locked me out." "It's worse." Jada's reply came within seconds. "They'll pay for this." Malcolm tucked the phone away. He leaned back, closed his eyes. He was trapped in place, physically, legally, but not broken. Deborah thought she had checkmate, but she didn't see the whole board. Not yet. The Airbus A380 cruised through turbulence, cabin lights flickering gold. Shadows played across Malcolm's worn clerical shirt, a canvas of stains, bruises, and dignity. The fake security alert still lingered in the air, silent and poisonous. Down the aisle, a young flight attendant moved with steady grace. Maya Cruz, just 6 months on the job. Her black ponytail swayed behind her, and her eyes scanned first class with cautious intent. She'd seen it all. The juice spill, the denied water, the snide slur, the locked bathroom, the forced glass. She'd seen Deborah's smug glances and felt the wrongness crackle, like static in her chest. She couldn't ignore it anymore. Maya stopped at the row just ahead, offering a snack to the businessman beside Malcolm. "Pretzels, sir?" He waved her off. She glanced at Malcolm. Her gaze lingered, and something in her snapped, a quiet defiance. She moved her cart just slightly, shielding her from the galley's view, and reached down. Her fingers brushed the edge of Malcolm's tray as she slipped a cold water bottle onto it, quick and discreet. Then softly she whispered, "I saw everything. This is wrong." Her voice trembled, but her eyes didn't. They burned. Malcolm turned his head and met her gaze. His eyes softened, a flicker of thanks rising beneath all the strain. "Thank you," he whispered, catching the name on her tag. "Maya." She gave a quick nod and pushed the cart onward. Her chest was tight with adrenaline, but she didn't regret it. Behind the curtain, Deborah was watching. She'd seen the exchange. She saw Maya's tiny act of rebellion, and her entire face twisted in fury. She erupted from the galley, heels hammering the carpet. Her jaw clenched, her pace a predator's. She grabbed Maya's arm mid-stride, yanking her back with such force that the cart rattled into a seat. "You're done!" she shrieked, her voice slicing through the hush of first class like broken glass. Passengers gasped. Heads whipped around. The businessman's laptop snapped shut. The woman in cashmere pressed her hand to her mouth. Deborah's finger jabbed at Maya's chest. "To the galley. Now!" Maya stumbled, but caught herself. Her eyes, wide with shock, held something else too, a blaze of defiance. And that's when Malcolm Price rose. 6 feet of calm, steady presence. His stained shirt clung to him like battle armor. Every mark a story. He didn't shout. He didn't threaten. He simply said, with a voice that filled the space, "Let her go." A preacher's command. Unshakable. His hands remained at his sides, open, peaceful. But his presence? Immovable. Deborah turned to face him, her lips curled. And then she snapped. The slap of her palm hit like a gunshot. Deborah Whitlow's hand connected with Malcolm Price's chest, a thud that echoed through the cramped cabin like thunder. And then came the slur, raw, venomous, and out loud this time. "Sit down, boy." Silence shattered. The plane erupted in chaos. A storm of gas, yells, and shuffling limbs jolted the cabin into disarray. Passengers bolted upright, some scrambling to pull out their phones, others frozen in their seats, faces twisted in disbelief. Across the aisle, the young man in the hoodie jumped up. "That's messed up." "Back off him," he shouted, his voice cracked with outrage. An older couple 2 rows behind Malcolm shook their heads, the man growling, "Disgraceful," while his wife clutched his arm in shock. But not everyone was on his side. A burly man near the front in a golf polo sneered, "She's right. He's trouble." A woman in a blazer chimed in nervously, "Just keep the peace." The cabin split, loyalties turning into fault lines. The temperature changed. The air turned jagged. And Malcolm stood at the center of it all, calm, unshaken, immovable. He didn't shout. He looked Deborah in the eye, while Maya Cruz, still shaking, pulled her arm free. Her glare didn't waver. It was a promise of defiance. Malcolm stepped forward, his voice rising, not in anger, but in power. "You don't get to touch her, or me. This ends now." Deborah flinched. Her hands clenched into fists, but the spell of control she held was broken. Every pair of eyes was on her. A plane full of passengers now saw her for what she was. Tom Hanley emerged from the galley like a shadow of threat. His frame blocked the aisle. But he hesitated, booing, and the flicker of phone cameras stopped him in his tracks. Malcolm calmly pulled out his phone, fingers moving with clarity. "It's chaos," he texted to Jada Price. Her reply was nearly instant. "Feds are waiting in Ravenhill." Malcolm slipped the phone back into his jacket, jaw tightening. He was bracing now, steeling himself. Deborah's fury overflowed. Her cheeks burned red, her bun loosening, and her voice hitched into a scream. "You're finished, you hear me? Finished." Her composure was shattered. Her mask was gone. All that was left was rage. Tom grabbed her arm. "Ease up, Deborah, they're filming." But she shook him off, her eyes locked on Malcolm with pure hatred. "Devil," she hissed under her breath. "You don't belong up here." The passengers began shouting over one another, some yelling for calm, others defending Malcolm, some still confused, trying to find the moral compass of the moment. The businessman beside Malcolm tried to raise his voice above the fray. "Everyone, just sit down." But the flood had already started. Malcolm stood tall, his chest rising slowly, rhythmically. In one hand he still held the water bottle, cool and half full, a symbol somehow of all that had brought them here. Maya stood beside him, trembling but unwavering. They were united now, two people who refused to fold. Deborah's shrieks grew ragged, her voice spent. Her eyes still spit fire, but her body sagged under the weight of exposure. The cabin had become a battlefield. Phones still recording. Passengers divided. But a shift was happening, truth gaining momentum. And Malcolm knew this wasn't the end, not even close. The Skybridge A380 rumbled through stormy skies, its lights flickering with the aftermath of the confrontation. A deep quiet settled over first class, more tense than peaceful. The eye of the storm. Malcolm sat back in 4B, his shirt still torn and stained, his breath steady despite the weight pressing down on him. The rage had burned through. Now came the fallout. Beside him, Maya stood tall, her small frame rigid, her arm bruised where Deborah had yanked her. But her eyes, oh, they burned bright with purpose. Back in the galley, Deborah leaned against the counter, her navy uniform rumpled, her bun unraveling, her breath coming in sharp, broken bursts. Her grip on reality was slipping. She'd exposed herself and the walls were closing in. That's when the intercom crackled. Captain Reynolds's voice came through, steady but heavy. "Ladies and gentlemen, due to a disturbance on board, we are diverting to Asheville Airport for an unscheduled landing. Please remain seated." The words hit like a cold slap. The passengers went quiet. Malcolm's jaw clenched. Across the aisle, the hoodie-clad man leaned in again. "They're pinning this on you, man," he whispered. "Ain't fair." Malcolm gave a faint nod. He knew. The lie Deborah planted, that false security threat, it was a noose tightening. He couldn't see it, but he could feel it. The plane banked hard. Through the windows, the city lights of Asheville began to glow through breaks in the cloud cover. Seatbelts clicked, bags shifted. The air grew dense. Deborah re-emerged from the galley, her posture stiff, her smirk gone, but her eyes ice cold with purpose. Tom followed her, his presence still heavy, still ready to pounce. They didn't look at Malcolm. They didn't need to. He knew what they were planning. He pulled out his phone and texted Jada again. "Emergency landing. Trouble's not over." Her response came fast. "Lawyers en route. Stay sharp." The wheels hit the tarmac with a jolt. Flashing lights blinked across the windows, red and blue, glaring through the night. This wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of a bigger storm. Red and blue lights bled through the windows of the Skybridge A380 as it rolled to a halt at Asheville International. Sirens howled in the distance, unmistakable signs of incoming trouble. Captain Reynolds stepped out of the cockpit, a tall man with graying hair and a chiseled jaw, his pilot's jacket still sharp despite the cabin chaos. He strode toward Malcolm Price, voice firm, barely concealing tension. "Sir, we need to investigate Ms. Whitlow's report. Please, come with me." Malcolm stood, 6 feet of calm defiance. Maya Cruz followed close behind, her defiance a quiet echo of his. Passengers leaned into the aisle, watching. Some filmed, others whispered. From across the cabin, the young man in the hoodie shouted, "This is bull!" Security entered the plane. 2 officers in dark uniforms, faces locked in stone. At the gate, Asheville Airport Police took over. The lead officer, a wiry man with a buzz cut and narrowed eyes, stepped forward. Metal cuffs bit into Malcolm's wrists. "You're being detained pending investigation. Threatening crew is a federal offense." Malcolm didn't resist. His voice was calm, but edged with steel. "It's a lie. Check the footage." The officer scoffed and shoved him forward, guiding him into a holding room. Gray walls, 1 chair, silence thick as concrete. Maya was pulled aside, her protest sharp, but brushed off. Her ponytail whipped behind her as she was dragged away. Back at the jet bridge, Deborah Whitlow stood watching, arms crossed, smirk curling. a predator relishing the trap she'd sprung. Hours crawled by. The cuffs chafed. Malcolm's back ached from the flight, the weight of injustice coiling tighter. He bowed his head, lips moving in prayer. Faith, his only armor. Then the door flew open. Heels clacked on the tile. Tara Jennings, Jada's attorney, stormed in. A powerhouse in her 40s. Charcoal pantsuit sharp as a blade. Auburn hair pulled tight. Green eyes ablaze. "They've got nothing," she snapped, tossing a tablet on the table. On screen, Maya's affidavit, her signature bold. Her words damning. Deborah attacked Malcolm, not the other way around. The officer grumbled. Tara's glare cut through him like a laser. Minutes later, the cuffs were removed. Malcolm's wrists were raw, but free. At the gate, Tara faced the security team head-on. Her voice sliced through their excuses like glass. "You detained an innocent man over hearsay. Let him go, or we'll have federal investigators crawling over this airport by dawn." The wiry officer scowled. His partner, a bald man with weary eyes, gave a reluctant nod. Malcolm was waved through. Maya was released too. A stark purple bruise bloomed on her arm. Her eyes met Malcolm's. Something unspoken passed between them. A vow. Nearby, Deborah's smirk cracked as Tara approached, slipping a formal notice into her hand from Stratosair's legal department. "Consider this a warning." Malcolm boarded the new plane, a Stratus 737 bound for Ravenhill. The cabin was half empty, the air fresher. The tension, however, lingered. He sank into a window seat, pulling out his phone. "I'm clear," he texted Jada. Her reply came fast, steely. "They're not done." The engines roared to life. Ashevale's lights disappeared beneath them. A young attendant approached, her smile warm. She offered a bottle of water. Malcolm accepted with a nod. Sipped slowly. The coolness soothed his throat. For a moment, it felt like victory. The cuffs, the slur, the lies, all peeled away. Maya's courage, Tara's fire, Jada's precision. Together, they cracked Deborah's shield. Malcolm leaned back. The hum of the plane was a lullaby. He hadn't known rest in hours. His eyelids fluttered. For the first time in a long time, he let himself believe, maybe, just maybe, the worst was behind him. Back in Ashevale. But in Gate 24, Deborah Whitlow wasn't finished. She paced the jet bridge, blazer slung over one arm, her bun unraveling, fury crackling in her veins. Her phone clutched tight in one hand. She dialed. "He's out," she hissed to Vince Keller, the co-pilot still in the cockpit of the grounded A380. His tone was flat, almost bored. "What's the play?" Deborah paused. Then her smirk returned. Twisted. Cold. "Sabotage the next leg. Make it stick this time." She ended the call with a flick of her wrist. Her breath steadied. Her eyes gleamed with vengeance. Malcolm's release had slapped her pride raw, and she was ready to burn back. Above the clouds on board the 737, Malcolm rested, unaware. The same attendant returned to refill his water. Her kindness was a balm after the venom he'd endured. He sipped again. Outside, the stars shimmered. Below, the world spun on. He pulled out his phone, thumb moving slowly now. Exhaustion dulled his reflexes. New flight. All good. Jada's response was short, sharp. "Stay alert." He brushed it off, closed his eyes, leaned his head against the glass. He thought he was in the clear. He didn't see the shadow of Deborah's revenge stretching toward him, ready to strike harder than ever before. Deborah Whitlow's influence hadn't ended in Asheville. It had only evolved, mutated into something darker. Now seated in the back row of Flight 219, Vince Keller, the co-pilot from before, now masquerading as just another passenger, scrolled through messages on a burner phone. His shaved head glinted beneath the overhead lights, his civilian jacket hiding the venom he carried. Plant it. Deborah's instruction had come sharp and desperate, and he had. An hour before takeoff, Vince had slipped a small bag of white powder into his pocket, Deborah's final weapon to bury Malcolm Price. An hour into the flight, turbulence rocked the plane. A sudden jolt sent murmurs through the cabin. Vince stood casually, feigning a stretch, and shuffled toward the overhead bin above Malcolm's seat. He fumbled with a duffel, his fingers expertly sliding the powdery bag into Malcolm's worn satchel, nestled beside a worn Bible and some toiletries. The trap was set. Silent. Deadly. Sliding back to his seat, Vince tapped out a message. Done. Cops will grab him on landing. Deborah's reply. Perfect. Malcolm stirred, blinking himself awake as the cabin steadied. His water bottle rolled to the floor. As he bent to retrieve it, he felt nothing of the betrayal now hiding inches above his head. Around him the mood was peaceful. Too peaceful. Screens glowed, heads nodded in sleep. The young flight attendant moved quietly down the aisle with a snack tray. Something itched at Malcolm's instincts, the way still water hides a current. And then it broke. A stocky white man in a gray hoodie, 3 rows back, stood abruptly, his face flushed with a mix of alcohol and manufactured outrage. Vince had whispered to him earlier. That guy? He went through your bag. Now he lunged forward, voice booming. Hey, you! Where's my money? I saw you. In my stuff. Gas rippled through the cabin. Phones appeared, cameras rolled. Malcolm turned, confused but calm. I haven't touched anything. Sit down. The man staggered closer, bourbon on his breath. Without warning, he swung. His fist clipped Malcolm's shoulder, a hard thud echoing in the small space. The cabin erupted. Malcolm caught the man's arm, twisting it back with the quiet strength of a man who's held pain heavier than fists. Shouts filled the air. The flight attendant shrieked for calm, her tray crashing to the floor in a spray of snacks. The man lunged again, clawing at Malcolm's already torn shirt. With one swift movement, Malcolm pushed him back, pinning him to a seat with firm, righteous force. Enough. The word dropped like a judge's gavel. The man stilled, suddenly afraid. Passengers stared. Phones recorded. Murmurs buzzed. Malcolm released him slowly, his chest heaving. He straightened his torn collar, composed. The young attendant rushed over. Are you okay, sir? I'm fine. He's drunk. She nodded, her gaze flicking warily to the overhead bin, but missing the deeper trap hiding there. Passengers sat back down, some nodding at Malcolm in quiet respect. Others whispered, wary, the old divide still crackling like static in the air. In the back, Vince watched, silent, smiling. He texted Deborah. Fight's done. He's still standing. Cops next. Malcolm exhaled, his shoulder aching, but he felt calm. Another storm weathered. Another injustice diffused with grace. The attendant returned, offering him another water bottle. Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice was genuine. Here you go, sir. He accepted it, sipped. The plane continued toward Ravenhill. Malcolm leaned back, letting his eyes close. A flicker of peace touched his thoughts. He believed he'd won again, but he didn't know the final blow had already been planted. The wheels kissed the tarmac with a soft thud. Passengers stirred. Seat belts clicked. Bags rustled. Malcolm stood slowly, stretching stiff muscles. He was ready. Then came the sound, the hiss of the cabin door opening, followed by the unmistakable stomp of police boots down the aisle. 3 officers stormed in, their badges glinting under fluorescent lights. The late officer, burly with a buzz cut and eyes like cold steel, pointed directly at Malcolm. You! Hands up! You're under arrest. Malcolm froze. His heart plummeted. Slowly, silently, he raised his hands. The cuffs clicked on, cold and final. And just like that, freedom shattered. The cuffs cut into Malcolm Price's wrists again, sharp steel biting bone as passengers gasped around him. Wait, he didn't do anything. The young flight attendant's voice cracked with urgency, but the officers didn't even glance her way. They dragged Malcolm down the aisle, heads turning, cameras catching the injustice frame by frame. At the back of the cabin, Vince Keller slipped off the aircraft, his jacket zipped tight, his face unreadable as he texted, "He's cuffed." The drop worked. From Denver, Deborah Whitlow's reply hit like thunder. "He's done." She grinned alone in her hotel room, the satisfaction curling her lips into something savage. The powder was her masterpiece, silent, invisible, lethal. And now Malcolm would wear the blame like a chain. Down the Ravenhill jet bridge Malcolm stumbled, his mind reeling. The planted drugs, the sudden brawl, the chaos. He'd thought he'd endured the worst. But this was darker. A new battlefield. The Ravenhill police precinct loomed under buzzing street lamps, its walls cold concrete and shadows. The sodium haze turned everything yellow, unnatural. Malcolm was shoved through steel-framed doors. His stained shirt hung torn across his shoulders. The night's bruises mapped on his skin like war paint. "Move it, preacher." "You're deep in it now," barked the lead officer, a heavy-set man with a buzz cut and a smirk. Malcolm didn't flinch. He met the man's sneer with quiet steel. "You've got the wrong man." A shove. Metal clanged, and he was locked behind bars that rattled like chains. The cell reeked of bleach and sweat. A lone light flickered overhead. Malcolm sat on a metal bench, his ribs aching, his breath shallow. The planted drugs loomed like a ghost in his mind. Proof of nothing and everything. He bowed his head, whispered a prayer into the cold. But then, boots. 2 more officers approached, both white. One tall and wiry, a scar trailing down his jaw, the other thick and broad, his baton tapping like a warning. "Resisted arrest," the scarred one said, voice low and venomous. "Check the footage," Malcolm replied. "Not rising, not resisting." The stocky one laughed. "Don't need footage. Trouble's written all over you." The door clicked open. They didn't wait. The baton cracked across Malcolm's ribs. The pain exploded, white-hot and breath-stealing. He fell sideways, gasping. Then fists, boots, more blows. His back, his arms, his legs. "You think you're above the law? Should have stayed in your place." Each word landed with the brutality of the system Deborah had weaponized. Malcolm didn't scream. He didn't beg. Through the blood in his mouth, he only whispered, "You're wrong." A final blow sent him into the wall. His lips split, the shirt torn beyond recognition. The 2 men stood over him, panting. "That's for fighting back," one said, though Malcolm had never lifted a hand. They spat, locked the door, and left him crumpled on cold steel. Time passed. An hour, maybe more. Then the doors burst open. Heels clacked like gunshots against tile. Voices shouted. Jada Price was a force of fury and fire. Her charcoal suit cut sharp lines in the fluorescent glow. Behind her, a full news crew trailed, cameras rolling, lights blazing. "Where's my brother?" the desk sergeant stammered. "Ma'am, we—" Unlawful detention, assault, planted evidence. You name it, I'm bringing it. You've got 5 minutes to release him, or the feds will own this building by sunrise. Panic. Cops scrambled. Keys jangled. The cell opened. Jada rushed in, her hand soft on Malcolm's shoulder. "I've got you." His weight slumped into her, pain blazing, but his mouth curled in the faintest smile. Cameras caught every angle. His face bloodied, shirt shredded, cuffs dangling. Behind them, Tara Reid, Jada's relentless lawyer, stormed in. Tablet in hand, voice like thunder. 10 minutes to explain this, or we bring down the Department of Justice. The precinct commander paled. Officers backed off. But the damage was done. Malcolm stepped out, wrapped in his sister's arm, his step slow but unbroken. "Father Price, what happened? Who did this to you?" Flashbulbs blinded him. Questions fired. But he didn't answer. He only focused on the door. On Jada. "You'll see," she muttered to the press. Soon enough. The SUV doors shut, muting the chaos. A cocoon of leather and low light. Malcolm leaned against the window. His phone cracked but functional in his hand. He texted, "I'm out." Jada beside him squeezed his hand, her silence louder than any victory cry. But they both knew the war wasn't over. Malcolm Price trembled in the passenger seat, his breath ragged, every inch of him aching. He looked down at his cracked phone, fingers shaking as he typed, "They're burying me." Jada's reply came instantly, her thumb moving fast as she pulled her SUV onto the highway, engine rumbling beneath her fury. "Then we bury them." But miles away in a dim motel room in Asheville, Deborah Whitlow wasn't finished. Her blazer lay in a heap on the floor. Her blonde hair hung loose, wild, and twisted. The TV flickered silently in front of her, Malcolm's bruised face on every channel. Her smirk twisted into a snarl. She grabbed her laptop, eyes burning, and uploaded a doctored clip of the in-flight chaos. Footage reversed, color enhanced, truth erased. Where Malcolm had shown restraint, she edited rage. Where he stood firm, she manufactured aggression. The caption she typed was vile. "Violent thug attacks passenger at 35,000 feet. She hit post, and the internet erupted. Within minutes, it was trending. Worse, violent priest. Hate boiled in real time. Strangers calling for Malcolm's arrest. For worse, Deborah leaned back, breath steadying. Her smirk returned. The predator was smiling again. Back in Jada's SUV, the glow of Malcolm's phone lit up his battered face. His ribs throbbed. His split lips stung. But what hit hardest was that headline, that lie. He turned the screen toward Jada. "They won't stop," he muttered, his voice hoarse. Jada's grip on the steering wheel tightened, her knuckles pale. "They don't know who they're fighting." Her voice was calm, deadly. Malcolm leaned back as the city of Ravenhill blurred past, skyscrapers slicing through the fog like accusations. He was battered. He was bruised. But he was not broken. Jada's phone buzzed again, Tara Reid's number lighting the screen. "National TV in 2 hours," Tara said through the speaker. "Good," Jada snapped. "Run everything. Raw footage. Maya's affidavit. Clip it. Stream it. Blast it across every outlet. I want the truth everywhere." "Give me 2 hours," Tara replied. "All business. A legal warhorse on the move." Jada pulled into a downtown parking garage, her tires screeching across concrete. She turned to Malcolm, voice soft but firm. "Rest here. I'll handle the rest." 2 hours later, Jada Price stormed into Stratus Air's downtown HQ, a sleek glass tower bathed in nightlight. The security guard nodded her in. Inside the media room, Tara was already waiting, laptop open, news crew prepped, cameras aimed. On the big screen, the real video played. Deborah's snarl, the juice spill, the whispered slur, the shove, Maya's brave water handoff. It was all there, raw, undeniable. Maya's affidavit lay on the desk, signed and stamped, exposing Tom Hanley's complicity, Vince's planted powder, every detail documented. Jada stepped to the mic in her charcoal pantsuit, every word slicing like a blade. "This is the truth, and justice starts here. Effective immediately, Deborah Whitlow is terminated from Stratus Air." The press release hit the wires within seconds. News networks picked up the broadcast and ran it live. Hashtags flipped in real time. "Rosers for justice for Malcolm." "For fire Deborah." Truth in turbulence, social media lit up, public opinion swinging like a pendulum. Deborah's smear campaign cracked and crumbled beneath the truth. Back in the SUV, Malcolm sat parked outside a diner, a TV inside flickering with Jada's voice. His split lip curled into a faint, aching smile. He'd been seen, believed, vindicated. Maybe, just maybe, the storm was breaking. In Nashville, Deborah Whitlow sat alone in her motel room, the screen playing Jada's broadcast on mute. Fired, disgraced. Her hands trembled. Then, buzz. A text lit her phone. From a burner number. An old contact she'd saved. We're in. A smirk crept across her face again. Cold, deliberate. She dialed. Her voice hissed through the receiver like smoke curling off fire. Torch his church. Make it loud. Deborah Whitlow hung up. Her fingers drummed against the motel table in Asheville. Her eyes glowing with vengeance. Malcolm Price had landed a blow, but she was about to burn his entire world to ash. Malcolm's church stood quiet beneath the moonlight. White steeple tall, its wooden frame a haven to dozens. Until a van crept up the hill. Headlights off. 5 hooded figures spilling out like shadows. Gas cans in hand. Lighters ready. They moved quickly. Silent. Ruthless. Fuel soaked the porch, the siding, the stained glass windows. A single match hissed. And then, flames. A monster of fire leapt to life, roaring into the sky as stained glass shattered, sending saints and sinners raining down in shards. Sirens screamed, but too late. The arsonists vanished into the night, their laughter swallowed by the rising inferno. Malcolm woke with a jolt in Jada's parked SUV, his bruised ribs seizing in pain. His phone buzzed. Live. Local church ablaze in East Ravenhill. He saw the steeple fall, the windows explode, the fire devouring everything sacred. He let out a guttural cry and stumbled from the car. Neon from the nearby diner lit his face like a bruise. Jada screeched to a halt beside him, throwing the door open. "Malcolm, no, wait!" But he was already hailing a cab. "Take me there," he rasped, voice cracking. The driver hit the gas. By the time he arrived, the fire raged in full force. Water arced over the church. Flames hissed back in protest. A crowd sobbed nearby, congregants, neighbors stunned and weeping. Then a voice, tiny, terrified, from within the basement. Help! A 6-year-old girl trapped beneath the sanctuary. Without hesitation, Malcolm ducked under the police tape and into the blaze. Heat clawed at his skin. His shirt tore on the splintered beams. Smoke stung his eyes. But he found her, curled in a corner, coughing. He scooped her into his arms, his every muscle screaming in protest, and staggered back through the smoke. They collapsed on the lawn. Paramedics swarmed. Cheers rose. Phones filmed. Hero pastor saves child. Brave preacher trends within minutes. But the flame of glory flickered fast. As Malcolm knelt, the child safe in medic's arms, a cop approached with grim eyes and something in his hand, a gas can. "Found this near the entrance," the cop said. "Your fingerprints are all over it." Malcolm froze. His prints? He hadn't touched. "Deborah." The cuffs snapped on again, cold, sharp, heavy. "You're under arrest." Gasps, cries, screams of, "That's not right." But the cop dragged him to the cruiser, slammed the door shut. Behind him, the church smoldered like a tombstone. In Asheville, Deborah watched it all unfold on TV, her lips curled into a satisfied grin. She texted Vince. "Church burned. He's pinned." Vince's reply came fast. "Beautiful." Inside the back of the cruiser, Malcolm slumped, wrists burning, ribs throbbing. But what haunted him most wasn't the pain. It was the echo of the little girl's cough, the terror in her eyes. Outside the window, Jada arrived, screaming, "This is insane!" He met her gaze through the glass. Her rage was a lifeline. her fury a prayer. He wasn't alone. The holding cell in Raven Hills jail was damp and dark. Rust stained the bars. The cot was a slab, and Malcolm, his clerical shirt now soaked with sweat, blood, and smoke, looked like a ghost. The flames played over and over in his mind. The rescue, the applause, then the arrest. His hands clasped, lips moved, a whisper of faith clinging to what little light remained. But it got worse. 2 white officers entered, their faces twisted in contempt, batons tapping like warnings. "Resisting arrest, huh?" one sneered. "I didn't resist," Malcolm said quietly. "Check the footage." They laughed. Then they stepped in. The tall one struck first, his baton cracking against Malcolm's ribs. Then the second, fists pounding his back, his side, his face. Thud, crack, grunt, silence. Malcolm collapsed, pain blooming like fire inside him. "That's for fighting back," one spat, locking the door behind them. Malcolm lay still, blood on his lips, breath shallow, but his eyes burned. Then came the thunder. Jada Price. She stormed into the precinct soaked with rain, her eyes molten steel. Tara trailed behind her, tablet in hand, fire in her steps. Jada slapped papers onto the counter. Unlawful detention, planted evidence, assault. "We end this now." The desk sergeant flinched. The chief sneered. "He's got a hearing today. Let the judge sort it out." Malcolm stood in court, cuffs glinting, his shirt torn, bruises visible under courtroom lights. Parishioners packed the benches. Reporters jostled. Maya Cruz sat near the front, her affidavit clutched in her hands. The prosecutor read her charges like poison. But the crowd saw the truth in Malcolm's eyes. They saw the scars. They saw the strength. The courtroom echoed with the clang of justice. Malcolm Price freed at last. The jury's not guilty still ringing in his ears. Reporters shouted. Flashbulbs lit his battered face. Jada gripped his arm, her voice a cracked whisper. "We did it." His ribs ached, his lips bled. But for the first time in days, he smiled. It was over. Or so they thought. Deborah Whitlow paced her dim motel room like a panther in a cage. Her blazer lay crumpled on the floor, her blonde hair a wild mess. On the flickering TV, she watched Malcolm walk free. "No," she hissed. "Freedom? For him?" She grabbed her phone, her knuckles pale. "Take the girl," she ordered, her voice a venomous rasp. She hung up, her breath ragged, heart pounding with hatred. If the courts wouldn't bury him, she would. Personally. Maya Cruz walked home under rain-slick streets, her ponytail damp, her steps light. The bruise on her arm had faded, but her courage hadn't. Her affidavit had helped clear Malcolm's name. Justice, she thought, had finally won. But just blocks from her apartment, a black van screeched to a stop. The door flung open. 3 hooded figures lunged. She screamed, kicking, scratching. Her nails raked one of them hard. But a cloth smothered her scream, her world spinning as she was dragged inside. The van vanished into the night, her purse left behind in a puddle. A silent cry in the storm. As Malcolm climbed into Jada's SUV, his phone buzzed with a new message from a burner number. He opened it, expecting relief. But the words sliced like a blade. "You'll pay. Check on Maya." "Deborah." His hands trembled as he dialed. No answer. Just an endless ring. He turned to Jada, his voice hoarse. "Something's wrong." They raced to Maya's street. Her purse lay in the rain. No sign of her, just the storm and fear. Malcolm collapsed to his knees, clutching the soaked leather bag like a lifeline. The church had burned. His name had been dragged through the mud. But this was too far. Jada's voice cracked like thunder. "They want a war? They just got one." She slammed the dashboard. Rain battered the windshield as Tara's voice crackled through Jada's phone. We got a plate off a traffic cam. Van traced to an abandoned warehouse on East Halstead, Industrial District. Jada nodded, swerving hard as tires squealed on the slick road. Malcolm leaned forward, his breath shallow, his face bruised and hollow. But his eyes, they burned. We're bringing her home. In the warehouse, Maya stirred. Her wrists were bound, her lip cut. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead. One of her captors leaned close, breath rancid. You should have stayed quiet. But Maya didn't cry, didn't beg. She just whispered, You're all going to burn for this. The warehouse squatted in the shadows of Ravenhill's abandoned shipping district, a beast of rust and shattered windows. As the SUV swerved toward it, Malcolm Price's eyes narrowed. His preacher's calm hardened into a soldier's resolve. Go, he said. Jada floored it, the tires slicing through rain-slick streets as the city blurred by. The van was already there, its side door cracked open like a warning. Malcolm didn't wait for the car to stop. He threw the door open and hit the pavement running. Rain soaked Malcolm's shirt to his skin. He pushed through the loading bay, his bruised body screaming with every step. The air was thick with mildew and gasoline. Shadows danced under buzzing bulbs. And then he found her. Maya Cruz bound to a chair, her face bruised, her eyes wide with terror. And standing over her, Deborah Whitlow, her blonde hair a tangled mess, her navy blazer discarded, a pistol in her shaking hand. You, she shrieked. You took everything. Malcolm's voice was low but steady. Let her go, Deborah. This isn't about her. Deborah's laugh was sharp and broken. It's about you. You don't belong. Never did. And now you'll lose it all. Her finger curled on the trigger, but Malcolm lunged. The shot rang out, ricocheting off steel with a blinding spark. They crashed into crates, wood splintering beneath them. Malcolm grabbed her wrist, slamming it against a beam. The pistol clattered across the floor. Deborah shrieked, kicking wildly, clawing his cheek. Blood mixed with the rain. It's over, Malcolm gasped, pinning her against the wall. Never, she spat. A shadow surged from the dark. Vince Keller. His shaved head gleamed, a blade flashing. Malcolm turned too late. The knife sank into his side. He collapsed, clutching the wound, blood soaking his shirt. Deborah scrambled for the gun again, her smirk curling like smoke. But headlights exploded through a broken wall. Jada Price stormed in, pistol raised. Drop it! The crack of her warning shot froze Vince in place. The knife clattered to the floor. Deborah swung the gun toward Jada, but Malcolm, bleeding and gasping, tackled her legs. They hit the concrete hard. Jada rushed to Maya, slashing her ropes free. Maya fell into her arms, sobbing. Malcolm dragged himself across the floor, blood trailing behind him, and reached for the gun. His hand wrapped around it, shaking, slick. Stay down, he rasped. Deborah cursed, writhing, but froze as red and blue lights flashed outside. Sirens screamed. Ravenhill PD flooded the warehouse, weapons drawn. Vince was cuffed first, his protest drowned in shouts. Deborah leapt to her feet, screaming, He attacked us! He's the criminal! But Jada stepped forward, lowering her weapon. Check the footage, the text, the plan. We have it all. The lead officer hesitated. And then the FBI arrived. A tall woman in a trench coat strode in, badge raised. Deborah Whitlow. Vince Keller. You're under arrest. Hate crimes, kidnapping, conspiracy. She held up a tablet, Deborah's burner text glowing on screen. We traced everything. Deborah's face cracked. The mask shattered. Her screams erupted as agents cuffed her. She thrashed, heels scraping the concrete. You're nothing. I'll finish what I started. Vince followed, silent, his knife now tagged and bagged. Paramedics lifted Malcolm onto a stretcher, blood-soaked gauze pressed to his side, oxygen hissing into his lungs. Jada knelt beside him, gripping his hand tight. You're safe, she whispered. Malcolm nodded faintly. his split lip twitching into a fragile smile. Outside the scorched shell of the warehouse, police cars idle, casting red and blue pulses over the cracked pavement. Agents bark orders, officers tape off the scene, and Deborah Whitlow's final lie dissolves under the avalanche of truth. Malcolm Price is wheeled out on a stretcher, rain washing the blood from his skin. The night swallows Deborah's screams. Inside Ravenhill Medical Center, fluorescent lights glow soft over sterile sheets. Malcolm lies still, wrapped in bandages. His torn clerical shirt is gone, replaced by a hospital gown. IV tubes snake from his arm to a beeping monitor. His side is tightly wrapped, the knife wound still raw. But in his dark eyes, there's light again. Quiet, steady, alive. Jada Price sits beside him, her pantsuit wrinkled, her hair undone. She hasn't left his side. Her fingers trace the ridges of his bruised knuckles like they're sacred. Maya Cruz stands nearby. Her bruise has faded, but her strength hasn't. Her spirit unshaken. The TV murmurs overhead. A news anchor's voice calm and clear. Former Stratus Air flight attendant Deborah Whitlow has been formally charged. Her connection to a violent hate group has been confirmed. On screen, her mugshot, and Vince Keller beside her. Stratus Air has reinstated Maya Cruz with full back pay and issued a $500,000 donation to rebuild Reverend Malcolm Price's historic church. Maya offers a quiet smile. Justice. Days pass. The hospital becomes a sanctuary. Nurses hum through the halls. Malcolm, now stronger, swings his legs over the bed. His breath is steady, his spine straight. Jada steadies him as he stands for the first time. Time to go home, she whispers. He smiles, tired but real. But before they can leave, he pauses. I need to see her. The county jail is cold, gray, and sterile. Malcolm walks slowly, a cane supporting his aching side. Beyond the glass, Deborah Whitlow slouches in an orange jumpsuit. Her hair hangs limp. Her eyes are empty. She doesn't speak when he picks up the phone. I forgive you, he says gently. Her mouth parts. No words come. He nods once, then turns to leave. A gift of grace, given where none was earned. Outside, dust drapes the parking lot in deep purple. The rain has stopped. Hope, fragile and fresh, hangs in the air, until a guard jogs over, slipping Malcolm a folded note. Found this in her cell, he mutters. Malcolm opens it. Vince escaped. Watch your back. His fingers freeze. Jada's eyes widen. Her voice sharp. He's out. The moment shifts. The quiet shattered. They pass the hospital lobby TV just in time to see another bombshell unfold. Breaking news. Stratus Air CEO Marcus Price under federal investigation. Their uncle. The screen flashes his image. Silver hair slicked, suit pristine, mask intact. Emails reveal Marcus Price encouraged internal suppression of dissenters, tying him to Deborah Whitlow's campaign of discrimination. Malcolm stops walking. His cane taps the floor, echoing like a gavel. Jada's breath catches. He knew, she whispers. Malcolm's jaw tightens. This isn't over. This wasn't just about a glass of water. It was about power, about hate, about how far systems will go to protect their own. But it was also about resistance, about evidence, about solidarity. Malcolm stood tall. Jada waged war behind the scenes. Maya risked everything for the truth. And now the world knows it. Marcus Price isn't just a name anymore. He's the next chapter.